Take a two-lane trip of memories into mysteries unknown. Come along for the ride. Jim Hinckley's America. Jim Hinckley's America.
Hey, good morning, folks. Let's see how this goes today. Windy and cool day in Kingman today, something a little bit unusual. Been dealing with some record heat, so this is kind of nice. Good morning, Andy. How's everybody doing this morning? Got a little bit of a frog in my throat here. You have been ambitious this morning, Andy. Yeah, looks like we're going to have some winds today. Well, a little bit of fun today. I've got some AAA guidebooks to share with you from the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. A little bit of an insight into the not so distant past. So anything unusual and new going on lately? I was always told that Kingman was founded by people who stopped and waited for the wind to quit blowing, and everybody else just broke down here.
Say hello to a new friend on an old road. Take a two-lane trip of memory.
Yeah, I got a few things to share with you this morning. Trying to tell people where to go.
Jim Hinckley's America. Jim Hinckley's America.
Yeah, an interesting question. I think I've shared the story of how I ended up here. I can't even, I'm not imaginative enough to make this stuff up. My dad literally threw a dart at a map. Uh, he wanted to get away from oceans and water. He'd been in the Navy uh, and also the Coast Guard up on the Great Lakes. And so he folded a map with no coast and threw a dart, and it came out near Yucca, Arizona. And the closest place he could get was Kingman. And so we loaded up like a bunch of Beverly Hillbillies and we headed west. And pretty much been, I've been in this country, Arizona, New Mexico. We had a little stint where we went back to Michigan for a few years, but pretty much ever since 1966, I've been one of the dry roasted nuts. Yeah, the dam brought a lot of folks down here. Crazy week. The more you read the news lately, the crazier things seem. If you notice that, it's just it just seems to be getting crazier and crazier by the minute. I'll share a bit of that this morning. I got some great headlines and different things that's caught my attention, made me laugh a bit. Good morning, Miss Sylvia. How are you? How are you and Bernard doing today? I'm sure glad that you're joining us. We miss your smiling face. Saw the pictures of your garden, and boy, I just couldn't help but think how nice it would be to be sitting there enjoying some fish Bernard or some coffee or some conversation. Really honored by our little theme song there. It's by the Joe and the Road Crew. Joe Leash and the boys of the Road Crew.
Say hello to a new friend on no road. Take a two-lane trip of memories into mysteries unknown. Come along for the ride. Jim Hinckley's America. Jim Hinckley's America.
We're doing okay, Miss Sylvia. It'd be better if we could see our friends, but I think we're all in that boat, so that's one of the big problems we've all got right now is missing friends we've gotten. So we've got our friends that are really family scattered all over the world, and we just can't do much visiting right now, and it makes it a real challenge. And who else do we have this morning? There's Andy and Sylvia. And who else do we have with us this morning? Mr. Keith Kentner, how are you, sir? Michael, good morning. For our folks in Germany, I guess it's Guten Abend. It's getting a little bit late in the day, huh? I have been practicing my German a little bit. Judy's been doing better than I have. Because we know we're going to get to come visit again someday. It's going to be about around 80 degrees and windy here in Kingman. We've been having record heat, at least for Kingman, pushing the 105 mark. Ron, how are you? Just got a couple more things to set up here, and then we'll get the show on the road. We're down to 3 minutes to kick off. Almost 3 minutes. If you've got any questions, like say, chime in, and I'll try to answer them for you if they're travel related, Route 66 related, or about some of the history we'll be sharing. And we're going to have some things today. I've got some old AAA guidebooks. I want to share with you a bit about travel and evolution of travel. And I've got some things here from the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s to share with you. Well, Andy, one of the great things about Kingman, a lot of people get upset that they say we don't have Keith. Keith Kentner showing we have no audio. Is that a problem, folks? Nope, Andy's got audio. Okay, that's what I thought. Very good. I'm going to share a few of these guidebooks, talk about some Route 66 motels, how they've evolved, give you a little bit of a snapshot there of some history. We're going to be talking about food today. As everybody knows, that food's a big thing for me. I'm sure partial to eating on a regular basis. And Miss Sylvia, I miss whenever I think about food, I can't help but think about our little restaurant down on the Rhine River down in Worms. It's good, Keith. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. Getting all my stuff together here. But I was always told, people complain that Kingman doesn't have seasons. Well, that tells me right there, as soon as somebody says that, I know they haven't lived here for more than a week. Because we generally have all 4 seasons in a week. And Andy can attest to this, especially around Kingman. I've seen it snow one week and be 80 degrees the next.
Jim Hinckley's America. Jim Hinckley's America.
Good morning, Harley. How are you doing today? Good to see you. Good to have everybody join us today. We try to get away from all the bad news, the craziness, and everything. And once a week, we've had to move this to Sundays, as everybody has noticed. First of all, I had a little bit of a schedule confliction, and I was real surprised when I put out the word and asked, which would you prefer, Saturday or Sunday? The overwhelming response was Sunday morning. And since everybody thought Sunday morning would be better, and as I had a bit of a schedule confliction for Saturdays, well, it just seemed like the thing that we needed to be doing. Let's see here. Let's get this show on the road. First of all, I want to say good morning to all of my me amigos out there, everybody who's taking time out of their schedule, pull up to join us this morning and see if we can get a little bit of a smile or at least a grin going. Grab a cup of coffee or tea. And, for those folks where it's after 5, maybe something a little bit stronger, a glass of wine or a little something like that. But pull up a chair and let's do a bit of visiting. So I'm glad that everyone could join us. How are you doing? How's everybody doing today? Let's see. So far for 2020, we've had civil unrest, a pandemic, murder hornets, Nile River crocodiles in Florida, and marauding monkeys. I just seriously, I cannot make this stuff up, folks. In India, monkeys attacked a hospital lab assistant and stole positive coronavirus blood samples. So, what do you think we're going to have to worry about this coming week? What's next on the agenda? 2020, the year of the apocalypse here. Well, let's kick it off with a hearty thank you to Joe and the boys of the road crew for our theme song. And if you need a theme song for your road trip adventures, or you just simply need some inspiration for a road trip, go check it out at roadcrew66.com. And boy, their song, like Under the Neon, they did a song for us at the Route 66 International Festival in Kingman, Kings of Kingman, back in 2014. Just some really great inspirational road tunes. And check that out at roadcrew66.com. Okay, on this week's episode of Coffee with Jim, we're going to be talking about the evolution of Route 66 motels. Yeah, Andy, I'm ready to reboot 2020, that's for sure. On this week's episode, we're going to be talking about evolution of Route 66 motels and hotels. I have some great old AAA guides that provide interesting insight into how lodging has changed over the years. Some of this is going to be kind of entertaining. I think you're going to be really surprised and find some of it actually even a little funny. Last week we talked about tour companies, and this morning I'll expand on that just a bit. And in response to questions received, I'm going to talk about some of my favorite restaurants. Let's see what else we've got here. And that seems like an appropriate opening to introduce you to one of our sponsors, Calico's Restaurant, here in Kingman, Arizona, over on Beale Street. And it's just spitting a jump down the road from the Mojave Museum of History and Arts, Beale Street, Highway 93, headed for Vegas, a couple blocks off Route 66. This is my go-to place when I entertain groups here in Kingman, because they have two conference rooms, one with a private bar. The food is always good. And in answer to some questions, what are my favorites? Well, I have two lunch favorites there that I really like. The cactus sandwich is lettuce, tomato, alfalfa sprouts, green pepper, red onion, avocado, mushrooms, and mayo on 9-grain bread. Really, really good. And if you want something with a little more illusion of health, my second recommendation is the Coyote Blt. It's pretty much the same as the cactus, but with tomato and bacon. And anybody who has seen me knows I'm getting kind of round. I'm getting into shape here. My interest in trying out different foods in restaurants and seeking out good pie while traveling is becoming increasingly evident every single day. That's one reason I'm trying to really keep my morning walkabouts going. But I get asked a lot about the restaurants and things that I enjoy. Well, I was asked an interesting question. Where can they find something different than traditional diner food? Where can we find something? Good morning, Rita. Hey, I wish we could see everybody could see your smiling face this morning. Always lights up a room. I had some interesting questions about where can we find some food that's really different, really good on Route 66. That's a little bit different, not your traditional diner food. Well, I got one for you. Try Hyder Baba in Pasadena on Colorado Boulevard. It's a couple blocks west of the Saga Motor Hotel. Well, of course, the Saga is one of my all-time go-to places for lodging in the Los Angeles area. Hyder Baba is an authentic Persian cafe. And right now, as far as a good cultural type foods, it's really near the top of my list. Generally, my dearest friend and I, we lean towards places that are a bit easier on the budget. But every once in a while, a treat's needed. Now, I've eaten at this restaurant several times, and I've never been disappointed. And you get a feel when you're eating there, it's kind of interesting because you feel like you're traveling internationally. When you look out the window, you can see Colorado Boulevard traffic flowing along Route 66. It's kind of nice. And another question I receive a lot about food. Sandra, good morning. Another question I get a lot is about breakfast. I'm glad to see a lot of people skip breakfast. I can't do that. I'm a big fan of breakfast, being an old farm boy. And I'm also a big fan. Well, no, not to interrupt our conversation here, Jim Urban, good morning. Nolan, yeah, I always like to try out different foods. And if you're in the Pasadena area, definitely check out Hyder Baba, just a couple blocks west of the Saga. I think you'd really be impressed. And as far as a Thai restaurant, there's a surprisingly good one in Kingman, which is downtown on Route 66, just past the powerhouse. Okay, breakfast. I am a big fan of the old-fashioned hearty breakfast, a meal fit for a hard-working farmer. And it's tough for me to narrow it down. I wrote a book, 100 Things to Do on Route 66, tried to share some of my favorite places, but 100 isn't enough. And just my breakfast places, my top 10 list has a couple hundred restaurants. And I'm sure that's going to be subject to change once we can get back out on the road. So let's just share this one. Tuggy and Joe's on Highway 19 in Cuba, Missouri. This is just a bit south of Route 66. It's really good. You show up hungry as a bear coming out of hibernation, and you will leave full. Prices are fair, food is good, and everything's served with an honest smile. And I like hanging out at a place where you can blend in with the locals. Just sit back and enjoy some eggs and coffee and listen to the folks. Listen about farm prices and get to talking to folks. Hamburgers, hot dogs, I'm partial to. My theory on this, Andy, is simple. If it doesn't move, I'll eat it. I'll at least try it. I may not eat it twice, but I'll at least try it. Okay, let's get to our show and tell and talk a bit about motels. You know, I'm always fascinated by how things evolve, like air conditioning. You know, in 1960s, air conditioning, it was even an option in Cadillacs. Try selling a car today without one. Look at the options on cars, for example. Now we have to have backup cameras, and all these things that were luxuries just a few short years ago are now considered necessities. Microwave ovens, all these kind of things. And motels are a lot like this. You look at the Motel and Lodging Guide. This is the AAA directory from 1927. And there's a couple of things you can pick up right away that's interesting, how things have not changed and how things have changed. This is interesting. For example, as explanation and travel tips, it says the rooms with baths are the most expensive, and they're usually the ones that go first. Good morning, Ken. And let me share this with you. We were talking about, a lot of people who are familiar with Route 66 know about the Beale Hotel. Well, the Beale Hotel came highly recommended in 1927. It had 70 rooms ranging from $1.50 to $3 a night. And the Brunswick next door was $1 a night. One of the things that was a problem in the West, especially during the summer, during the era of the National Old Trails Road, people camped a lot, and there was problems because they would just there were so many tourists. In 1915, when Edsel Ford traveled out to the California Panama Pacific Exposition. There were more than 20,000 travelers that went to that event from outside the state of California, arriving by automobile. And the number one road for travelers was the National Old Trails Road because of the desert scenery and the things you could see. And camping was a big thing. And to capitalize on camping and to kind of prevent just an influx of people just sleeping everywhere, sanitary problems and all kinds of things, cities started putting in municipal campgrounds. Here in the Southwest, motels suffered greatly in the summer. Why spend $1.50 to $3 a night when it's just as hot in a hotel room as it is sleeping out under the stars? Nolan, to kind of backtrack, Cuba. You also might try Frisco's Grill and Pub, and Cuba Bakery and Deli, and Riviera Maya in Cuba. In California, the Aztec was an all-new motel, and I'm glad to see that that might be finally coming back to life. And the price for the Aztec was $1.50 a night. And the Aztec is uniquely styled, in case anybody has noticed that or familiar with it. It's more Mayan facade, but we weren't going to split hairs. There was a dramatic change in travel in general between 1927 and 1940. And good morning, Miss Maggie. Not only had cars changed, roads had improved. Route 66 was finally paved end to end. My pa always said, better to fill your head with useless knowledge than no knowledge at all. Route 66 was fully paved in 1936. And we were talking about staying outside rather than sleeping in a motel room. Well, I got an interesting story to share with you here from Kingman. The White Rock Court listed here was $2.50 a night. We also had in this listing the Akron Motel hotel cottages, 11 modern cottages with a bath in every room. A lot of your municipal campgrounds, they had a shower, a shared shower. And a lot of your auto courts and motels did not have in-room facilities. Even as late as 1940, you paid extra for that service, having that in there. The White Rock Court is still in existence. It's a really rare property here in Kingman. It dates to about 1936. And it's also mentioned in Jack Rittenhouse's classic guide to Highway 66, written in 1946. Let's see here. And an interesting thing about this, as I mentioned, staying in a car, why spend $1.50, $2, $3 for a room? And yes, Miss Maggie, this is live. And Conrad Minka came up with an idea. Several years ago, I started interviewing some of the old timers who had run motels on Route 66, and they didn't have a good word to say at all about Conrad Minka. And I found out that I thought, some of it was grounded in jealousy. What he had done, he'd been a hard rock miner. And the auto court is very unique because it is an auto court. It dates to 1936, so that makes it a very rare property. And I'll tell you a little secret about it in just a minute that makes it even more rare. But what Conrad had done is he had drilled a shaft on the mountain behind the hill, behind the motel, and then he put utility corridors under the rooms. And at the bottom of the shaft, he had put in a big tank with water-hung sheets of burlap in it and set up a fan system down towards the front of the drift tunnel that came up to the motel. And that way he was pulling cool air into the motel rooms. So needless to say, people were a little upset with Conrad because during the summer when a lot of their business fell off, even though tourism was at its peak, Conrad was doing the bustling business. He beat the system. This is interesting. In Kingman, in 1946, Jack Rittenhouse's guide, we had, for a small town, population 2,200. Now, mind you, I want to give you this kind of a picture, mind picture, if I will. In 1939, more than 1 million people traveled Route 66 through Arizona. Still, look at this. Now, to show you the impact on communities. Population 2,200. We had hotels listed as the Beale, the Brunswick, and the Commercial Hotel. We had the Akron, Arcadia, Wallapai, Williams, Kit Carson Motel, Gypsy Garden, Stony Wall, Bungalow, White Rock, Lambert's, Gateway Village, Bell's, Stratton's, Kingman, El Trovador, and Challenger, all listed as tourist courts. Then they had trailer courts because people were traveling with their trailers more and more. You can find this in the movie Long, Long Trailer with Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. And they have a list of trailer courts here. Another picture on how things have changed. And then if we jump ahead a tad bit to the 1950s, early 1950s, we have a rather dramatic change in what people were expecting out of hotel properties and motels. And what there again, the things that had once been luxuries were now expected. And this created a problem for the older motels. They had to either revamp or close. And that's why so many of the auto courts and things are gone. Because even by the 1950s, they were outmoded. An example, though, the one that survived, and another rare survivor in Kingman, is the Arcadia Lodge, which opened in 1939. It evolved through the years, and of course now it's a low rent, weekly, monthly place in pretty hard times. It is for sale. Make a great complex for somebody with some money who wants to invest. But the Arcadia Lodge is an attractive Spanish-style court on landscaped grounds. Air-cooled units have 1 and 2 rooms with central heat, tiled shower, and combination baths, baby beds, restaurant adjacent, and a swimming pool. Things that started to change. And a good morning. Branding Iron Motel, Bell Motel, Loma Vista, swimming pools. And now they started advertising, starting in the late 1930s and through the 1940s. Some of the things the motels would advertise was a radio in every room or a radio available at the office. By the 1950s, if a motel was really upscale and wanted to attract people, they advertised television. But this is really, all this is only part of the story. This is kind of interesting and it's kind of timely with what we've got going on right now here in the States. The questions we're addressing and asking and talking about racism and things of that nature. Because, the Route 66 most of us talk about isn't the same Route 66 for the African American motorist or the African American families. Remember, we had a different world at that time, and one of the problems we had was extreme segregation that really changed things. Let me share this with you. Consider this. On August 11th, 1955, there was an accident near Klein's Corners, New Mexico. And it was a traffic accident and 6 deaths. Fatigue was given as the official cause of the accident. And the men were all African Americans. An investigation by the NAACP published in the Albuquerque Tribune noted that not one auto court, hotel, or motel on Route 66 between the Texas state line and Albuquerque would provide lodging to African Americans. The report also noted there were more than 100 motels along the Route 66 corridor, Central Avenue, in Albuquerque. Less than 8% would rent a room to, quote, Negro travelers. That was the reason Victor Green created the Negro Motorist Green Book. Good morning, Michelle. It was a travel guide for the African Americans, where they could stay, where they could buy gas. Even gas stations would deny service to African American travelers. Pretty crazy. I'll be talking more about the Green Book on a future program. We won't get into that right now, but this is another thing that makes the White Rock Court in Kingman, Arizona, historically significant, and it's another thing that makes it an extreme rarity. And it's also one reason a lot of people had trouble with Conrad Minka. He was the only Kingman property listed in the Green Book for the Negro motorist. Okay, let's talk tour companies. One of the most valuable things I have is my reputation. And that's why I'm pretty damn selective about who I endorse and who I will even accept as a sponsor. And with that said, I work with more than 30 tour companies. Each has something different to offer. Each will ensure a unique and memorable experience. Of these companies, a lot of these folks I have gotten to know intimately. A lot of the tour company owners, a lot of have become very, very good friends. And I don't just recommend them because they are sponsors. I recommend them because I believe in these guys and I trust in them. And I get angrier than a wildcat in a sack to see companies offer people a Route 66 experience. They take their money and then give them a bus trip along the interstate highway with the occasional stop at the off-ramp. And that's more common than you'd think. And it really ticks me off. That's a good way to get on my bad side. So if you're thinking Route 66 adventure and tour company, do your homework. That applies to planning the trip on your own. And you really might be surprised to learn that in the long run, your best bet is a tour company. It'll save you a lot of time and aggravation, especially if this is going to be your first trip. And with a good tour company, you'll get more out of your experience. Two companies that come to mind, one out of Australia, Dale Butel's group, great motorcycle tours. He runs a really tight ship. If you want something a little more relaxed, a little more, no, I shouldn't say structured, but a little out of the ordinary as far as they give you more leeway to make your own stops and things during the day. Gilligan's Route 66 tours out of New Zealand, and Gilligan's also offers the self-drive tour. But there again, it's an apples and oranges. Both of these companies offer tremendous value for the dollar. Gilligan's goes all the way from end to end, all the way out through Los Angeles to Santa Monica Pier. Dale usually stops at Las Vegas, but Route 66 Tours offers other things like little, they might do Route 66, a trip to Sturgis National Parks in Colorado. They add other things. Gilligan's does not do motorcycles. Route 66 Tours has car or motorcycles. So do a little bit of homework. And if you're looking for a tour company information, drop me a note. We'll talk a bit and narrow down what your interests are, what you're wanting to see, and whether you prefer a car or a motorcycle. And then I'll put you in touch with a company that fits what you need. And somebody will take good care of you. I can even help you find a company that speaks your language and can interpret if you're not comfortable with English. I can even suggest a company that have guides that speak fluent Aussie. I've been working on studying on my German for quite a while now, and it builds up a lot of confidence. I'm hoping, maybe if I get good enough at this and confident enough, I'll try to learn to speak Aussie. I'm not sure how that'd work out, but we'll see. And if you're traveling without a guide, okay, whether you're a novice or whether you're a seasoned Route 66 road warrior, you've been up and down the road a whole bunch, one of the things I really suggest is that you buy a subscription to the Route 66 navigation app. That's route66navigation.com, and pick up a Mother Road Route 66 passport. With this in hand, you'll never get lost. You'll discover the very best of Route 66 and you'll have the ultimate customizable souvenir, that passport. Take a look at, like I say, at Route66navigation.com. Wow, that kind of went fast. It looks like I've been beating my gums for about a half hour, and that means it's about time to wrap this up. First, a reminder, tomorrow, or later today, excuse me, later this morning, do not forget 5 Minutes with Jim, our weekly audio podcast. I'm a little delinquent this morning, but I will have that up in about 20 minutes. Good morning, Angie. And podcast is really a great little thing. It's just 5 short minutes, guaranteed to be a lot of fun. And we have kind of changed the format a tad bit. We talk a lot about automotive history, and you can find this on the Jim Hinckley's America website. Go to our podcast page. If you're a fan of automotive history and trivia or interested in pioneering tourists, take a listen. You can find, like I say, all the episodes there. And if you like that, you might also have interest in the features I'm currently writing for motoringnz.com, a New Zealand automotive publication. And with that said, of course, I want to give a shout out to some, of course, we have our advertising sponsors, which are a big part of what we do, but the core of everything here happens to be our crowdfunding initiatives. And, if you're able to jump in and, $1 a month, a couple bucks a month, it may not seem like much, but with pooled resources, I can accomplish quite a lot. And as a way of saying thank you, I'm providing some exclusive content, including right now my autobiography in serial format. As scary as that may be, I consider it a darkly comedic tale. Miss Maggie, you're not sharing your donuts. Well, it's about time to bid adios for another week before I wear out my welcome. And before we wrap this up, is there anything you want to discuss? Anything you want to talk about? Any questions I can answer? Now's the time, or have to hold your peace until next week. Folks, I'm always appreciative. I thank you for taking time to join us this morning. And I do hope that you'll join us again next Saturday for another episode of Coffee with Jim. Become a follower of Jim Hinckley's America. Invite your friends. We do occasional On the Road with Jim programs. Excuse me. And those aren't scheduled. They're just spontaneous. If I find something of interest, somebody of interest, we're going to sit down and visit and chew the fat a bit. And I did neglect. I forgot to give a shout out to today's coffee cup sponsor, Giganticus Heticus at Antares Point. Guys, do we have any questions? Anything I can answer for you? Good morning, Kevin. We're going to do this on Sundays. It'll be next Sunday morning, 7 o'clock, Mountain Standard Time. And hope that works for everybody. And these, of course, programs will be on the Facebook page. And they're archived usually the next day on our YouTube channel. You can find all of our On the Road with Jim programs as well as Coffee with Jim on the website. JimHinkley'sAmerica.com has a YouTube link, or you can just go to Jim Hinckley on YouTube. Folks, I want to thank you again, and we will see everybody next week for another episode of Coffee with Jim, sponsored in part by the fine folks at the Roadrunner Lodge in Tucumcari, New Mexico. Vaya con Dios, mi amigos. We'll see you next week.